Hello, Arlene. Okay, I guess we're supposed to watch that video first. Not necessarily. So, I'm going to go and read it. If you already watched the video or which I released a few hours ago, or watched read today's blog post, this will be a repeat. I'm not sure that I'm going to read the whole thing because it will take a little while. And so, like I said, it's been an experiment. If you'd like, as I read my reflections on the introduction in chapters 1 and 2, if you want to comment or ask questions or whatever. And for those of you who haven't read anything, hopefully my introduction will be helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. I begin with a quote from the introduction. Meanwhile, out in what is fondly called the quote unquote real world, by people who often don't know very much about reality, you are living in a metastasizing machine which is closing in around you, polluting your skies, in your woods, in your past, in your imagination. So I'm going to jump away from the blog post really quickly before I kind of go on with that. I don't know how much of an introduction. Probably if you're here, you probably don't need much of an introduction to Paul Kingsnorth and his work. Last week's video, if you go to the Gadfly Academy, well, if you go to the videos from last week on this channel, I've got kind of an introduction to not so much who Paul is, because he has a wonderful article called The Cross and the Machine, which talks about his conversion to Christianity. And then he's also got a very good about page on his website, paulkingsnorth.net, telling you kind of who he is and what he's written and so on. So I'm not going to waste your time with that, because most of you probably already know all that, but just want to point you to those things. This book is really important. The thing that I talk about in my last week's video and blog post was kind of Kingsnorth's place in a tradition, a kind of an esoteric tradition, not spiritually esoteric, but kind of intellectually esoteric. Maybe someday there should be like a studies program at a university. There was this media ecology program at NYU, which unfortunately was attached to the communications department. It should have been probably connected to the philosophy department. It might have survived, but it did not survive, unfortunately. But a media ecology is kind of an adjacent. It's the closest thing in the academic world to a place for the writings of people like Paul Kingsnorth, other people in the tradition, or other people that I've covered on Gadfly Academy. Neil Postman, certainly, and he was the one he coined the term media ecology. He wrote the book Amusing Ourselves to Death and Technopoly, among others. Wendell Berry, I think, certainly falls in this tradition. You could also call it, anti-machine writing. Again, there hasn't been a lot of kind of meta study of these works, but there is a tradition. I was trying to think of other works since Neil Postman's Technopoly in 1992 that would kind of fit into this tradition, and I really couldn't think of a work that was as important as Paul Kingsnorth's new book. So before that, there was Neil Postman, there was Jacques Ellul, Ivan Illich, and so on. So I go into that I try to place Kingsnorth in a tradition, intellectual tradition. It's really it's not just kind of for the academy. It's writing usually often by people that are well read, but about topics that are very kind of their cultural criticism, essentially. Okay, so that's a bit of an introduction. You can watch previous videos to get a bit more. There are also links under those videos to some of these articles and so on. So, all right, I'm going to get into today's blog post, and then anything that you want to talk about, you can post about. And I think below this, there should be a link to this blog post. So if you want to read along while I read, if that's helpful, you can click on the link and go to my Substack. So the real world. So it's a modern conceit that those who live according to the dictates of modern society are the ones living in the quote unquote real world, while everyone else, the monks, the religious, the poets, the artists, are living in a dream world, a utopia. Ironically, the opposite is actually true. Like Kingsnorth, and likely most of you, I have always felt ill at ease in the modern world, repelled by, among other things, its isolating tendencies, wasteful consumerism, shallowness, and lack of roots. We have lived our matrix like existence either unaware of what was going on or unable to act differently. We have pretended that we could enjoy the benefits of the machine and that there wouldn't be a price to pay. The reality, however, is that we were always paying a price for our luxuries, our conveniences, and our efficiencies. These were hidden costs, costs that don't show up in our spreadsheets, but very real nonetheless. The truth is that the real world exists outside of our spreadsheets, and the path forward is one for which we don't have precise maps. Kingsnorth begins his book with a quote from Wendell Berry that, in a sense, summarizes the entire book. Here's the quote. It is easy for me to imagine that the next great division of the world will be between people who wish to live as creatures and people who wish to live as machines. And that was from Wendell Berry. I'm working my way through a Wendell Berry book right now. Every time I come back to Wendell Berry, I wonder why it's taken me so long to get back to him. He is a wonderful, wonderful writer. I can't recommend him highly enough. He's a novelist, poet, and his essays are just fantastic. So Kingsnorth actually did a kind of compendium of some of his favorite essays. It's a good place to start. It's called The World Ending Fire. As Kingsnorth notes, Berry wrote this over 20 years ago, and society has not ceased to continue on this trajectory. The reality is that this is the direction society is headed, and unless we make different decisions, we can expect the same outcomes and worse. We are like the proverbial frog in the kettle being boiled to death. My hope is that Kingsnorth's book will inspire and encourage people to realize that for a variety of reasons, we cannot continue to live our lives according to the order, structure, and dictates of modern developed culture. For a long time, returning to the land has been one of a myriad of lifestyle choices one could make. Increasingly, this may become more of an imperative than an option. Most of us in the West have lived with the luxury belief that each of us could and should make lifestyle choices according to our own personal whims. This is one of the many modern lies resulting from our underlying confusion about what it means to be a human. These kinds of lifestyle choices are only possible in the completely unreal world that we find ourselves in. Moving forward, there will be an increasing cost of choosing any particular path. There will come a time, likely sooner than we expect, where we will have to decide whether following our particular lifestyle choice is worth the cost to freedom of conscience, personal autonomy, etc. The real world is, at very least, the natural world that sustains us. And if we hope to find inner peace as well as an actually sustainable existence, we would do well to rediscover the gift that is the actually real world. So that's maybe a quarter of it. So it's actually, I think, took me about 15 minutes to go through it. I don't know. Maybe I'll just go through part by part. That way, if you have thoughts, we can discuss. And if not, then I'll just continue. How can we get your reading list? I've signed up on your site, but never get to an actual list to download it. All right, Charles. If you send me an email at newsletter at gadflyacademy.com. Just reach out to me that way. And if any of you are not yet on my newsletter list, it's probably helpful if you want to stay in the loop about these talks, and then you can download the How Did We Get Here reading list, which has all sorts of other wonderful books. I need to update it. I need to put the Kingsnorth book on there for certain. So, all right. Well, actually, let me see. I think I can actually share my page, what I'm looking at, and then maybe that'll be helpful rather than having to look at me. Oh boy. Oh dear. Oh, I've lost it. How is that possible? All right. That was probably. Oh. Okay, there it is. All right, I don't know if this is helpful, but maybe it'd be easier if you're able to read along with me. No, this is not gonna. I'm not gonna do this. Sorry, let's cancel. All right. Again, if you want to follow along, you can click on the link, and I'm gonna work on maybe trying to figure out how to share my screen and stuff in a way that works better. But okay, so here this is the second part. Here's another quote from the introduction. Most of the things you like are fading away. And actually, I'll comment a little bit on this. As I read it, I thought, definitely these are the things that I like. One of the problems, of course, is that one could read this, and if one has been raised on video games, then video games are what one likes, perhaps. So that's a challenge. I guess I mentioned that by way of saying that's a challenge. That said, I think all humans have had some kind of interaction with the natural world in their childhood that helps them see that there's more to life than just the pursuit of material wealth or whatever. That's what Kingsnorth, his spiritual journey started when he was a child. And it really came to fruition when he finally became an Orthodox Christian. But he would say that it was all kind of a part of a journey, and that journey was encountering God in the natural world. So I'll go back to, here's the quote. Most of the things you like are fading away. The great forests and the stories made in and by them, the strange cultures spanning centuries of time, the little pubs and the curious uninhabited places, the thrumming temples and dark marshlands, and crooked villages, and folk tales, and conviviality, and spontaneous song, in old houses which might have witches in them, the possibility of dragons, the empty beaches and wild hilltops, the chance of getting lost in the rain forever, or discovering something that was never on any map, a world without maps, a world without machines. End quote. So what to do? A good place to begin is to actively rewild oneself. And Paul actually has a course on how to rewild oneself, or at least one's writing. I'm not sure. I have to revisit that because I know he had a course on rewilding, but I think it might have been actually as a writer as opposed to kind of as just a person. So that is to cultivate love for the outdoors, as much as possible to spend free time outdoors, gardening, walking, camping, foraging, figuring out what it is that one can eat, out of, the wild plants and so on around us. Cultivate a love for wild places and seek them out while they still exist. Free time indoors can be spent rewilding one's mind, reading the old myths and legends, deepening bonds with like-minded people who refuse to live as machines, and learning to embrace the stillness and silence that was common to most generations of humans. Something else that I didn't write, put into the blog post that I think I probably will write about. There's a group of people you may be familiar with called Strong Towns, and different there's different reasons for strong towns, but the general idea is that we humans need to be in strong communities, and so Strong Towns does what it can to advocate for that. um, and I think that's a really good place to start. People ask, what can I do? And Paul Kingsnorth suggests that this, for example, you start by destroying your smartphone or something like that. Although he's not dogmatic about these things. He realized that everyone kind of needs to figure out what they need, and what their capacities are for change. But one big one would be, to live in a place where you can actually build a community, and even if it's not the perfect community, at least maybe it's something better than what one has in the suburbs, for example. So trying to move to a small town, certainly close to family or friends or whatever, that's a really basic thing that a lot of people maybe could do. It'd be inconvenient. All these things are, inconvenient, and they definitely are not the easy way. But if one is convinced that this is an existential need, then one has to kind of, as I say, kind of make more serious decisions. Um, The modern mind, soul, and body have been shackled by the machine culture that we were born into. The only path to liberation lies in actively pushing back against it. Not a Tyler Durden style response. If you don't know about Tyler Durden, he was the hero in Fight Club, who ended up blowing up, trying to essentially destroy the economic system, financial system, by blowing up banks and stuff. So not a Tyler Durden style response, but rather a quiet revolution, not inspired by lifestyle choices, but by the profound realization that our society took a wrong turn at some point. As C.S. Lewis once famously wrote nearly 100 years ago, and here's a quote from C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity: "We all want progress, but progress means getting nearer to the place where you want to be. And if you have taken a wrong turning, then to go forward does not get you any nearer. If you are on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the right road. And in that case, the man who turns back soonest is the most progressive man. There's nothing progressive about being pigheaded and refusing to admit a mistake." And I think if you look at the present state of the world, it's pretty plain that humanity has been making some big mistake. We're on the wrong road. And if that is so, we must go back. Going back is the quickest way on. And of course, I think even C.S. Lewis would probably agree that maybe the term progress is problematic, but you get the gist of what he's saying. Um, yes, yes. Fight Club identified the problem, but offered the wrong solution. Yeah, indeed. Um, and yes, well, the nice thing about it is that you can do this even in suburbia, depending on just how urban your sub is. One can do it anywhere. One, the challenge, of course, is um, you can't change the people around you. Obviously, you can change how you live, um, and we are obviously affected by the people that are around us. And so it depends. If change can happen anywhere, certainly. It's just that change is easier in some places. And when you're around people that are also intentional and realize that how serious the issue is, because I think it really is serious. This has been my experience. And it's very inconvenient to do some things that are different. But if the situation is as serious as I think it is, as Kingsnorth thinks it is, as Wendell Berry thinks it is, and many others who are, I think, serious, not conspiracy theorists or something. There's even outside of kind of larger picture problems. For me, the biggest question is, what is this doing to us internally, and can we accept that? Can we accept the forces that are pushing on us, and the kind of pressures that we're forced, the kind of choices we're forced to make? I think the analogy of the frog in the kettle is a really apt one. I think that is what's happening. And I was thinking back to, when the iPhone was introduced in 2007. I didn't end up getting a smartphone until maybe 2014, I think. There was no need. It was an item that was very useful and had potential and so on, but we could definitely go back to 2007 or 2005 and have a very nice life without smartphones. And these new technologies come in, and then they change everything so profoundly. And then we live in a world that is absolutely affected by these things. And at a certain point, there has to be a reckoning. There has to be a point at which we say no further. And each generation, it becomes harder and harder to make those boundaries. So it's an ongoing question. Like Kingsnorth says, one has to make these decisions for oneself, where one's going to draw these boundaries. All right, anthropology. So Kingsnorth begins chapter 1 with a discussion of philosophical and theological anthropology. What is a human? What does it mean to be human? What is the purpose of human life? At the heart of the modern problem are these questions. If one does not believe that humans are more than simply a machine, then there is no need to continue the conversation. If, however, one believes that humans are more than simply machines, then everything should change, and a completely different orientation to the modern world is necessary. The modern world is largely the creation of a humans as machines anthropology. In opposing this world, one needs to change one's perspective, to clarify one's value system, and to attempt to live according to these values with greater integrity. And I say this to myself first. I'm certainly have a lot of things that need to change in the way that I live my life. If Kingsnorth is correct, it is not enough to simply have right anthropological ideas. True ideas that actually matter in the real world come out of an integrated way of life, which in turn is the fruit of a certain story that a culture tells itself. This is why Kingsnorth refers to Christendom and its central role in creating the West. Christendom was successful to the extent that it created a culture within which people could live according to the Christian story. Once the culture no longer lived according to the Christian story of creation, of death and resurrection, and so on, there was no longer a way to preserve the vitality of the culture's ideas, anthropological, cosmological, etc. Families and communities can be supportive or suffocating. Sometimes it is hard to navigate lifestyle choices. Yes. Well, I was speaking with a friend today, and this is a real thing. she was talking about life in a small town, 50, 60 years ago in small town America, and how everybody knew what everyone else was doing, and there was gossip, and um, life is messy, relationships are messy. Um, the 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 question, I guess, is, is the path that we've taken, which is the path of extreme individualism, is that really what, the path forward? Um, because if it is, then again, there's no problem. We can continue to live, in our 3,000 square foot homes or whatever it is. Separated from each other, and living our own lives in suburbia. Um, or we can take, bear the cross of the other, um, and it's going to be messy, relationships, communities, they are messy, and I try not to romanticize these things, because I know they're not easy, and sometimes um, the temptation is just to close one's door and to live one's life, and to cut people out of one's life. And um, if C.S. Lewis's vision of hell in The Great Divorce is right, that's suburbia really looks like the vision of hell that he paints, which is um, essentially people going out into the darkness to separate from the others because they can't stand them. And that's I don't think that's a society that we want to create, but that is a society that we're creating. So community is a cross. The other person, is a, that's, and families can be challenging. I know. I know. Sadly, I recall reading the boiled frog analogy was myth busted in reality. But conceptually, it makes the point. Yep. I'll have to find an analogy that actually holds water. Pardon the pun. Um, yes, he's speaking to the public, not academics. Yeah, well, these are the people that I think, are to me the most interesting. The C.S. Lewis's of the world, um, Philip Sherrard. All these people were, some of them were actually academics, but kind of on the edge of academia. I have a video where I interviewed one of the students of Neil Postman, and I called it Rebel Academics. That's kind of the media ecologists are, they're academics in their own field, but they come together to look at kind of do kind of cultural criticism, and by doing that, they're trying to look at the big picture, which academia doesn't really like. They like you to be very, only speak authoritatively about something very, very specific, but then you lose the forest for the trees. Um, huh. The original test that held led to the boiled frog analogy used brain damaged frogs. Given our current widespread cognitive state, I feel like it still stands. uh, Orthodox Fellowship of the Transfiguration. I had a friend that was involved in that, Orthodox boomer grandma. Um, and yeah, I next time I'm in contact with Paul, I might mention that to him, make sure it's on his radar. I'm sure uh, he would appreciate the work that they do. Um, all right, so anthropology. I'm going to read not too much longer. Um, this This is the next section. Roots. In chapter 2, Kingsnorth addresses the problem of rootlessness. He begins an argument that he will continue in future chapters regarding the nature of colonization and how, in order for capitalism to flourish, it requires people that are not self-sufficient. It is much more difficult to sell to people who are self-sufficient, and capitalism requires consumers. Um, this is one of the really wonderful things about his book, I think, at least for me. I mean, maybe this is, maybe everyone else who reads it will be like, these things are obvious, but um, Kingsnorth, at least for me, offered a perspective on capitalism, on political theories that is it's an uncommon perspective and a really helpful perspective um, as a kind of the culture war just being. He has an analogy, essentially two bald men fighting over a comb, um, and yeah, the many of the things that people think are the most important thing are actually just symptoms of the underlying cause, and that's where I think Kingsnorth is so important, and this tradition of cultural criticism is so important because so many people waste so much energy and time fighting about things that are symptoms rather than trying to actually address the problem. Um, Having been born into the machine of capitalism, it's hard to imagine a life that operates outside of the system. The reality, of course, is that even today, many groups do live outside the system. And one of the ways that they are able to do this is that their communities tend to be tightly knit and they have high degrees of self sufficiency. These groups have a clear sense of identity and community purpose. They know who they are, where they come from, and what they're supposed to be doing. This clarity of vision comes from the clear story about themselves that they share. The story of capitalism, of course, tells a very different story. It goes something like this: you are rootless. You have come from nowhere and you are progressing into a quote unquote better world. And because you have no community, you require the machine to provide for your needs. As Kingsnorth said recently in a talk, the decision to put down roots where you are, even if you didn't come from there originally, is an act of rebellion. Yes, in our machine society, we have limited agency, but we do have a certain amount of control. Of course, there are consequences to deciding to put down roots, potentially less opportunities, the difficulties that come with accepting the limitations of life, a particular climate, particular people, and so on. That said, without roots, one remains at the whim of the machine, untethered from community, from nature, from one's decisions ultimately being determined by the machine and its endless quest for increased power and wealth. I've often asked myself, doesn't a person have some kind of obligation to the community that raised them? From birth until adulthood, each of us was given freely by our families and by our communities. Of course, love cannot abide compulsion. Each person must choose their home, their family, their community. But surely, for most of us at least, the strongest case is for the home, family, and community that cared for us when we were most vulnerable. For those who understand the problem, the path forward is one of small rebellious acts, such as making a commitment to a place and to the people there, and to instill a love for that place in our children. And of course, then our children will have to make that decision for themselves. But at least if we teach them why it matters, um, rather than just kind of what we've done is just say, it doesn't matter. And I don't think that's true. I think it does matter. I think that is, where one decides to live and how one decides to live is a moral choice, and uh, we should look at these choices in that way. Again, there are always, you know, life is messy, the world is messy, and one can't be too dogmatic. But as a general rule, these things do hold because we do have a responsibility. We do have a responsibility to our communities and to our families, and to the extent that we can uh, have the integrity to address those responsibilities and to take those responsibilities on. We should try to do that. That's the you know. Otherwise, society will fall apart and will continue to fall apart. At the end of chapter 2, Kingsnorth introduces another theme that he will return to throughout the book. Our culture wars are a symptom of a rootless society that doesn't know who it is. Here's another quote from the end of chapter 2. When a plant is uprooted, it withers and then dies. When the same happens to a person or a people, or a planet full of both, the result is the same. Our crisis comes, I think, from our being unable to admit that on some level we know to be to admit what on some level we know to be true, that we in the West are living inside an obsolete story. Our culture is not in danger of dying. It is already dead, and we are in denial. This now is the reality we have to wrestle with and transcend. And this is another very important idea that I think I've had, but Kingsnorth kind of really uh, drives home. Um, when one thinks of, especially Europe, I think it's maybe most clear in Europe. You think of the beautiful cathedrals and the beautiful buildings, and all those things were built by a different culture. It wasn't our culture. We don't build those things anymore. For the most part, we build large, ugly buildings that are very, very practical. Even though we are the wealthiest culture, society in the history of mankind, we have the money, we have the resources. We could build beautiful things. We could build incredible, cathedrals and beautiful buildings, but we don't. And so the culture that built the beautiful things that we love in Europe um, was a vibrant culture, and we do not have that vibrant culture anymore. And that's the reality that Kingsnorth wants to drive home. And I think we need to see that. And Kingsnorth's book helps to show that is true, and to show that the path forward is to build a vibrant culture again. So then you have to ask yourself, well, how do you do that, and what's the path forward? And it'll take generations, because it took generations for us to get into the mess that we're in. But at least if we start to understand what the problem is, and we start to have a vision for the path forward, then maybe our children's children can build upon the vision for something better, something that's more vibrant, that's more true. Um, Kingsnorth's argument is essentially that there can be no serious conversations about politics, cultural renewal, or a path forward until we come to terms with the meta reality in which we find ourselves. Until we do this, we are simply rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. This reframing of the cultural conversation is important and useful. It gives us an actual path forward and a sense of what is not the path forward. Um, so that's pretty much what I wrote today. I also cut out a bunch of quotes. I'm trying to post them via social media. If you're not friends with me on Facebook, feel free to friend me. I post, I think, almost daily a quote from Paul Kingsnorth's from the book, because I want people to read the book. I really think it's an important book. All right, let me go. There you go. Okay. The frogs are just too distracted by iPhones and Netflix. I picked up the Sherard's Rape of Man Nature when I got against the machine a few weeks ago. I guess my goal is to make myself really depressed. I guess my goal is to make myself really depressed before the year ends. Yes. Yes. Well, I guess my take is it's better to live in reality. It's better to face face reality, and um, the sooner we do that, the better. And I hopefully it's liberating. For me, it is liberating. Uh, St. Paul says, I've learned to, I'm paraphrasing very, very much so, but it's something like, I've learned to be happy with much, or happy with little. And uh, the reason was because because it didn't matter materially. So all these things, to my mind, it's like, if we're in a really bad space, if we're in a really bad place, understanding how we got there, then helps us to see kind of what we can do to make things better. And I think there are things, and there's a need, and most people do not take the time to ask these questions. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just a strange, maybe I'm really just an aberration, and these books are not ultimately helpful. But I don't have a, I kind of can't live life otherwise. Once you kind of see these things, and it's certainly not alone. Uh, y- One just has to read like Brave New World or something. These books were describing this kind of the spiritual forces behind our world, and the effects that they would have on society, and they've obviously proven to be very prophetic. Um, so hopefully we can, at least virtually for now, and maybe in person at some point. There's a group called I think it's called Doomer Optimism, and um, we have to try to be optimistic, and I think finding other people that are doomer optimists is a good thing. So that's one of the things I want to do with Gadfly Academy, is to um, uh, be a hub where people can hopefully encourage one another. Um, my friend calls that architectural depravity. Yeah, well, it's there's a book called Living Machines by E. Michael Jones that's really interesting, and he looks at modern architecture, um, and kind of the philosophical ideas behind it. And uh, in a sense, you don't even need to look at a book. You need to just like look at our what we've built, and in a sense, if you have the right perspective, it kind of speaks for itself. Um, in my list, the How Do We Get Here reading list, I mentioned one of the books I mentioned is called A Pattern Language by Christopher Alexander. He's definitely would be in this tradition in the world of architecture, and he provides a path forward. He provides a language, an architectural language for how to build. He studied the traditional building practices of traditional cultures, and came up with kind of a schema, a way to build, a way to think about building, that is living, and he's wonderful. He has another book called uh, uh, oh, what's it called? I'll think about it. The timeless way of building. The timeless way of building. Um, Reminds me also of when all the decor someone has in their homes from Hobby Lobby. Yes, yes. We have the skeletons of Western Christian culture, and some pockets of the body remain. Yeah, well, someone was saying, what was it? That 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 Western culture is a corpse, and that conservatives are rooting for the corpse, and progressives are rooting for uh, the decay. Um, this is a big question. This is one of the questions that Kingsnorth actually has this quite a provocative talk, and you could read it also as a paper, but he gave it about a year ago at the First Things conference, the Erasmus lecture, called "Against Christian Civilization," and it wasn't so much. It certainly wasn't against Christendom, but it was against the modern attempt to revive something that is no longer, that is at least at very least, maybe on or at most on life support. Um, his question was, or his point, I think, was that the path forward is to build something that's actually vibrant, rather than trying to revitalize something that has already been killed. Um, and is the glass half full or is it half empty? That's probably a question for another time. But that's quite a provocative talk. Almost everything Kingsnorth writes is worth reading, I think. So weirdly, when I went to the Touchstone conference last month, Kingsnorth and company were focused on uh, these doomer. Yet strangely, I felt inspired and uplifted in the end. Good, good. Well, it's good to be around other people that see the world similarly. To know that you're not not crazy, I guess, concepts. Uh, until my friend used that phrase, I had no idea how to express the ugliness of our cultureless houses and buildings. Yeah. Touchstone conferences always give me hope. God wins. I think finding a community of like-minded people who also see what is happening is very reassuring and hopeful. At least we'll all go down fighting together. Yes, yes. Well, I I don't intend to stop writing and talking about these things, and I would like to, uh, yeah, to work on getting people, uh, finding ways to connect people. About maybe 2/3 of the way through Kingsnorth's book, he talks about something called jellyfish tribes, and these are essentially um, tribes of people in Southeast Asia that live outside of the jurisdiction of local governments. They cross borders and so on, and they aren't necessarily, of the same tribe, but they are like-minded and they support one another, even though maybe hundreds of years ago they would have been fighting one another. But now they're all kind of fighting for their freedom to live traditional subsistence lives, which is what they want to do. And so these jellyfish tribes uh, are apparently still a vibrant thing in Southeast Asia. I'm sure they're diminishing. Um, but I was thinking, there could be something similar, and maybe that will develop. Like there are groups, like obviously in America we have the Amish, um, and I don't know to what extent they'd be, interested and willing uh, to have a conversation. But I think there's got to be, within each part of the country. I was thinking actually Indian reservations as well. I don't know. I don't know, what kind of life there is there, but if one could find, groups of people that share similar concerns, and even though ideologically or whatever, I mean, in a sense, this is almost like an ideological thing, but it wouldn't be like really a political thing. It's more just like uh, a vision of the world, and an understanding of the problems, like the actual nature of the problems, and finding other people that are similarly minded. So anyway, I don't know what or if it will look like, but my hope and intention is to continue this conversation. This is why I really wanted to go hard on this conversation around Kingsnorth's book, because um, it is a cultural moment. It was on the I think went to maybe number 11 on the New York Times bestseller list, at least for 1 week. So lots of people bought the book, and hopefully lots of people will be talking about the book, and it'll be influencing um, the way people think about things. Good to hear that about the Touchstone conference. Uh, his point was also to not put the culture cart before the Christ horse. Yep. I live in a largely atheist progressive community. The deliberate uglification occurring among the youth is strange and alarming. Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but also, in a sense, we have nature on our side. People, we do have bodies. The youth do have bodies, and sunsets are beautiful, and uh, uh, camping and spending time outside is wonderful. And so we do have nature on our side, and so and beauty is on our side, and beauty, people do respond to beauty. So I think there are lots of things that we can do to fight, to push back um, against the uglification. And I think we can make a very compelling case, um, for something better. Um, in the 70s, there was a big movement out of the cities in the countryside. My parents were part of that movement. Yeah, yeah. Well, there have been countercultural movements in the past, and there's probably been some studies of what happened. Uh, I don't know if Wendell Berry is, I think, a really wonderful, a helpful character figure to look at, because he was someone that kind of made it. You could say he was a professor at NYU, and decided that no, he was going to go back to his hometown in Kentucky, and farm the land, and to learn from that experience, and try to, because he saw, I think, what many of us see, but he saw it 50 years ago and decided that he was going to make a real change. I mean, honestly, he's a very inspiring figure. It's kind of a sad too, because 50 years ago he saw it, and he's been writing and fighting, and he's very highly regarded and respected and so on. But most people don't want to hear it.
Where is he?
He's in Kentucky, Port William. But yeah. Anyway, we can't give up. I mean, to my take is, like, there's just no other option. There's no other option than to try to find a better way to be, and to help future generations uh, uh, get oriented. Um, For Catholics, finding others, check out the current revival of the Catholic land movement, book, Liturgy of the Land. I have heard about that, and I'm definitely interested in finding out more about what they're doing. Um, Somebody needs to make an Against the Machine documentary to reach the many people who won't read the book. Yes, yes, indeed. And I have had certainly an interest in film in the past. I lived in Los Angeles for a while and was wanting to make films, and so I still have that in my heart. Yeah, no, I think many documentaries could be made, a whole series, looking at different things. So I think you're right. God's nature triumphs over man's ugliness. Yeah. Well, this is the thing with all these things. You can only resist nature for so long, and eventually things will return. Um, uh, we build in floodplains, because we can, and but eventually the floods do come, and that gets, the things get washed out, and it's terrible. But that's what we do. We try to defy um, nature. Yeah, yeah. If not enough hours in the day, but I figure, one step at a time. Tonight has been a one big step, actually. So thank you all for being here so much. It means a lot. I wasn't sure that anyone would show up. If you don't already have it, please track it down, or not. And if you want to just follow these, I'm going to be giving my thoughts again. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, there should be a link under the video. I am making merch. If you want to help, support what I'm doing. I've got I think it turned out really well. In time for Christmas, You Are Not a Machine. T-shirts. There's a couple of designs, a couple of different options. I've got a got a flag. I hate, in a lot of ways, this is the antithesis of what I want to be doing and what I want to be promoting is Chinese made things. That said, I mean, here we are using modern technology, and at some point I'd love to get beyond this, but we're kind of, if you want to build a movement, if you want to inspire people, having things like this that start a conversation are actually kind of helpful. Here's the hoodie. So there's that. It's actually really high quality. I didn't want to start selling them until I saw what the quality was, but the quality is actually really high. There's a coffee mug as well. So stay tuned. The store will go live in a week or two in time for Black Friday, for Christmas. So if you want to start a conversation with family, friends, certainly Paul's book would make a great gift, as well as some You Are Not a Machine merch. So yeah, it's actually speaking of tight, if you order a sweatshirt, make sure to order a size larger than you're used to. They err on the larger. Yeah, so if you're a medium, maybe get a large. That's just for the sweatshirts. I learned the hard way. For sure. Thank you all so much for being here. And do I have an e-commerce site? So I'm using a company called Printful, and I will be sharing the link probably at the next live stream. I'll put it in there. Maybe I'll officially release, open the merch store maybe next week. Maybe I'll do that. So I'm also going to be, I think, doing some live streaming on Monday evenings. I'm not going to promise to that, but I'm going to try on Monday evenings. For those of you who are interested in a theological take on Kingsnorth, my background is in Orthodox theology. I have a doctorate in theology from the University of Thessaloniki, Aristotle University in Greece. And my doctoral dissertation was on C.S. Lewis. So I created this Gadfly Academy so that I could do cultural criticism and maybe not be, kind of super theological. But as I read through, I just keep wanting to write kind of a theological takes on what I'm reading. So if anyone's interested in that, I also have this other channel, Protecting Veil. So you can, if you're on the newsletter, I'll be mentioning it there as well, I think. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, Mondays, probably 7:30. Again, it will be on the other channel, which is Protecting Veil, the Protecting Veil YouTube channel. So, all right, a Tumblr. Okay, I might. I'll work on the Tumblr. I've really, the coffee mugs actually look really cool too. But I'll work on a Tumblr. See if Printful has one. So. Found you through Protecting Veil. Your interviews due to so many great Orthodox. Thanks to God. Good. Well, it's 8:31. I'm going to try to cap these at about an hour. Honestly, I could kind of go on for a lot longer, and maybe someday we'll go have a longer one. But maybe at the end of it, maybe we'll have a party in January when we finish the book. But thanks so much. Please tell a friend. The more the merrier. I think we tapped out at about 16 or 17 today, which is a great beginning. So, but please do share with like-minded people. That would mean a lot. The more people reading the book and showing up for the conversation, the better. The more the merrier. So, thanks a lot, and have a great weekend. And if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, please do that. There's a link below the video. Good night.